Well, they shouldn't expect, right now, they shouldn't expect to be supported at all, and they're not supported at all. They're making their own money. They've done their deals with Netflix, with Spotify, with making the documentary with Apple TV, writing books and other things. They don't expect to be supported now. They're not supported now because they've forged ahead and made their own way. I think
at some point, that money, that tap was going to get turned off.
Absolutely. And I don't think at any point they wanted the tap to still be on. You know, they had a transition period.
Prince Harry seemed pretty upset about it in the Oprah interview.
Because he was so concerned about security. You know, that's what he said, and what he said repeatedly. It was about security for his family that had been, you know, under attack. When I say attack, you know, they had so much abuse leveled at them. He was concerned for his family, he's concerned for security.
Vicky, you'll
and
understand how important that security.
All right, so you've just heard that clip from Good Morning Britain, and let me tell you something. Moments like this are rare. Very rare. Because for once, someone on the UK morning show decided to apply logic, facts, and common sense, and the building didn't collapse. Afua Hagan came in calm, collected, and unshaken, and she did what so many people refuse to do when it comes to Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex. She spoke plainly about reality. Not drama, not fantasy, not palace folklore. Reality. Because the truth is simple. Even if some people choke on it, Harry and Meghan are financially independent, doing just fine, and they do not need the royal family to survive, function, or flourish. Now notice how the conversation started. The very first question was framed with a loaded assumption. Would Harry and Meghan expect to still be supported financially while stepping back and making their own commercial deals? Expect. That word is doing a lot of work there, because the implication is that Harry and Meghan somehow felt entitled to royal money while plotting independence behind the scenes like cartoon villains rubbing their hands together. And Afua shut that down immediately. She said no. Flat, firm, and factual. They should not expect to be supported. And more importantly, they are not supported. Let's sit with that for a second. Not they shouldn't be, not they might not be, they are not. Afua made it crystal clear that Harry and Meghan are making their own money, their own deals, their own income streams. Netflix, Spotify, Apple TV, books, documentaries, other ventures, independent work. That's not hypothetical. That's documented. And here's what people hate the most about that reality. These deals weren't handed to them out of pity. They were offered because Harry and Meghan bring global attention, massive audiences, and cultural relevance. Corporations don't sign contracts based on vibes. They sign contracts based on value. And Harry and Meghan have value, separate from crowns, palaces, and ceremonial titles. Afua also emphasized something that gets deliberately ignored. Harry and Meghan didn't expect ongoing support because they forged ahead and made their own way. That phrase matters. Forged ahead. That implies effort, planning, risk, courage. It implies walking away from something guaranteed and building something uncertain. And that's exactly what they did. Then comes the next question, almost like a dramatic sound effect. So at some point, that tap was going to be turned off. And again, Afua doesn't flinch. She says yes, absolutely. And then she adds the most important part. They didn't want the tap to still be on. Now, this is where the narrative usually falls apart for the critics, because if Harry and Meghan were truly desperate to stay financially dependent, why on earth would they walk away from guaranteed royal funding, housing, security, and status? Why voluntarily leave the system if the goal was to keep extracting from it? It doesn't add up. What does add up is what Afua pointed out next. There was a transition period. And let's be adults for 5 seconds. Of course there was. Harry was born into an institution that managed every aspect of his life, including security. You don't just wake up one morning, hand in your badge, and magically have everything sorted by lunch. A transition period is practical. But people love to pretend transition equals dependency forever. It doesn't. And then, right on cue, the Oprah interview gets dragged into the conversation, because whenever someone runs out of financial arguments, they pivot to emotions. But Prince Harry seemed upset. Yes, he was. And Afua explained exactly why. Security. Not money, not privilege, not luxury. Security. Harry was concerned about protecting his family after stepping away from an institution that had previously provided state-level protection, a family that had already been subjected to extreme harassment, threats, and abuse. Let's be very clear here. Security is not a vanity expense. It's not optional when you're one of the most recognizable people on the planet with a documented history of trauma related to press intrusion and loss. Afua didn't minimize that concern, and she didn't exaggerate it either. She stated it plainly. Harry was worried about keeping his wife and children safe. That's not entitlement. That's responsibility. And the way she explained it stripped the situation of all the melodrama that usually surrounds it. No violins, no outrage, just logic. And notice something else. No one on that panel could actually counter her points. They could redirect, they could sigh, they could move on, but they couldn't disprove anything she said, because facts are stubborn like that. Harry and Meghan are not supported by the royal family. They do not expect to be supported. They have built independent income. They planned their exit. They prioritized security. They moved forward. That's the story. Everything else is noise. And here's the part that really rattles certain people. Harry and Meghan didn't just survive outside the royal system. They thrived. They created Archwell. They produced content watched globally. They published books that dominated conversations. They engaged in philanthropy on their own terms. And they did it without palace briefings, royal rota protection, or taxpayer-funded safety nets. That's not failure. That's evolution. Afua's defense hit harder because she didn't sound defensive at all. She sounded informed, grounded, confident, like someone who actually understands the difference between optics and reality. And that's why moments like this matter. Because for years, the same tired storyline has been recycled. Harry and Meghan will run out of money. Harry and Meghan will crawl back. Harry and Meghan can't survive without the institution. And yet, year after year, none of that happens. Instead, what we see is consistency, stability, strategic partnerships, a quieter life with clearer priorities. They didn't leave because they couldn't handle royal life. They left because they wanted control over their own lives, and Afua said the quiet part out loud. They didn't want the tap-on. They wanted autonomy. That's powerful, because it reframes the entire conversation. This wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't a rebellion. It was a calculated decision made by two adults who knew what they were giving up and what they were gaining. And the fact that this still shocks some people says more about how invested they are in Harry and Meghan failing than anything else. So when you hear people ask whether Harry and Meghan need the royal family, remember this clip. Remember how calmly it was dismantled. Remember how unbothered Afua was while speaking truth on a platform that rarely allows it. Harry and Meghan don't need the royal family. They needed freedom. They needed safety. They needed independence. And they got it. Thank you for watching, and happy holidays. Happy New Year.